Have you ever been in a room full of people where someone speaks very little, yet somehow everyone listens when they do? They're not loud. They don't interrupt. They just sit there calmly, maybe nodding once in a while. And then when they finally open their mouth, every word feels like it matters. That kind of presence, it's powerful. You know, the older we get, the more we begin to realize something very important. It's not always the person who talks the most who has the most wisdom. In fact, many of the wisest, most thoughtful people I've met over the years didn't say much at all. But when they did, people leaned in, because those few words carried weight. Today, I want to talk to you heart to heart about something we don't hear about often: the quiet strength of people who speak less, and more importantly, how that strength might already live inside of you. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the most respected. You don't need to say much to say something meaningful. There's a reason why silence is sometimes called golden. And there are some real beautiful traits that are often found in people who choose their words carefully. Not because they're shy, not because they don't know what to say, but because they understand something deeper about life, about people, and about themselves. Let's take a walk through this idea together. I'm not here to give a lecture. I'm just here to share some quiet truths with you that might already be resting in your heart. One of the first things you'll notice about people who speak less is that they often listen more. Really listen. Not just hearing to reply, but hearing to understand. And let me tell you, that's a rare gift. Especially in today's world, where it feels like everyone's talking over each other. But when you speak less, you create space. Not just for your own thoughts, but for others to truly be heard. And in return, you often end up knowing more than most. You catch the little things, the look in someone's eyes when they're pretending to be okay, the slight change in tone when someone is holding something back. People who listen deeply tend to be trusted more, not because they say much, but because they make others feel seen. Listening is more than just good manners. It's a form of love. It's a way of saying, "You matter to me." And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of listening, you know how healing it can be. You walk away feeling lighter, understood, sometimes even surprised at what came out of your own mouth, because someone gave you the space to open up. But people who speak less also tend to think more. There's a patience in their silence, a kind of inner conversation that's always going on, even if their lips aren't moving. They weigh their words, consider the effect they might have, and often choose not to say something unless it truly needs to be said. And that kind of restraint? That's not weakness. That's power. It takes real strength to hold back when you could speak, especially when emotions are high. But these folks, they know that not every thought deserves a voice. Not every opinion needs to be shared. And not every moment is meant to be filled with sound. There's a quiet dignity in that. You see, speaking less gives your words more meaning. When you don't speak often, people pay more attention when you do. It's like music. The pauses between the notes are just as important as the notes themselves. They give shape to the melody. They give the listener a moment to breathe, to reflect. Sometimes silence says more than a paragraph ever could. And then there's this. People who speak less are often better at self-control. They're less likely to blurt something out in the heat of the moment, less likely to gossip, less likely to say something they'll regret 5 minutes later. That's not because they don't feel strongly. It's because they've learned that words can't be taken back. They know that once something leaves your mouth, it's out in the world. And while apologies matter, they can't always undo the damage. You might recognize this in yourself, especially now. Maybe when you were younger, you spoke quickly, reacted fast, said things you didn't mean. But with age comes a different kind of wisdom. You pause. You breathe. You realize that sometimes the best response is no response at all. That just because someone is trying to push your buttons doesn't mean you have to let them. That staying calm doesn't mean you've lost. it means you've won something far more important: your peace. And that peace? It's priceless. Another beautiful thing about people who speak less is that they tend to be observers of life. They don't rush to be the center of attention. They're watching, absorbing, learning. You might find them at the edge of a gathering, quietly sipping their tea, listening to the stories, nodding here and there. But they're taking everything in. And that gives them a kind of insight that others miss. Because while everyone else is busy making noise, they're seeing the bigger picture. They're the ones who spot the quiet child in the room who's being overlooked. They're the ones who notice when someone seems off but hasn't said anything. And they're the ones who can offer comfort, not always through words but through presence. There's something incredibly comforting about being with someone who isn't trying to impress you, out-talk you, or fix you. Just being there, just listening, just being still with you in the moment. And sometimes, especially in this season of life, that's exactly what we need most. You know, we live in a world that rewards volume. The louder you are, the more attention you seem to get. But volume doesn't equal value. And those of us who've lived a little longer, seen a little more, and felt a few more heartaches, we start to understand that more clearly. You begin to see that the quiet people in the room, the ones who speak less, often have the deepest thoughts, the richest stories, and the kindest hearts. And maybe that's you. Maybe you've always been the listener, the thinker, the one who waits. Or maybe you're just starting to embrace that side of yourself now, realizing that you don't need to explain yourself to everyone. That your peace, your silence, your wisdom, it speaks loud enough. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation or in a room full of chatter, don't feel pressured to fill the silence. Instead, ask yourself, what needs to be said? And what might be better left unsaid? Trust that your presence matters, even when your words are few. Because the truth is, the older we get, the more we realize. We're not here to prove ourselves anymore. We're here to live with meaning, to speak with purpose, and to find peace in the pauses. Let's continue walking down this path together and uncover more of the quiet strengths that make people who speak less so impactful. There's a calm confidence that grows in you when you no longer feel the need to constantly prove yourself with words. It's not that you stop caring. It's that you finally understand your worth doesn't depend on how much you say, but on how you carry yourself. People who speak less often have this quiet assurance. They're not trying to win every argument. They're not scrambling to be heard. They know who they are, and that's enough. That confidence doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-awareness. It comes from having lived through enough storms to know that panic doesn't help, and shouting never makes the rain stop. It comes from experience, from lessons learned the hard way, and from understanding what truly matters. You might find that people like this don't chase approval. They don't need to announce every success or defend every decision. They're content letting their actions speak for them. There's a humility there that's deeply admirable. And if you're someone who's learning to embrace that now, give yourself credit. That's not giving up. That's growing up. One of the most beautiful traits of people who speak less is that they give space for others to shine. They're not interested in being the center of attention all the time. They'd rather lift someone else up, let someone else tell the story, or simply enjoy the moment without needing to take over. And isn't that refreshing? Especially in a time when so many people seem to be fighting for the spotlight. They understand that true connection comes from listening, not from dominating. That when you allow others to speak, you learn more than you ever could by always leading the conversation. And they've often discovered that people open up more when they feel safe. Not judged, not interrupted, not outshined. Now that doesn't mean quiet people don't have opinions. On the contrary, they usually have strong ones. But they've learned that sharing those opinions is most effective when done with timing, intention, and care. They're not trying to convince everyone. They speak when it matters, and that's what makes their words so powerful. You might think of someone you know who fits this description. Maybe a friend, a relative, or even your younger self. Someone who didn't always chime in, but when they did, the whole room paused to hear it. That's not by accident. That's influence. And it's earned, not demanded. There's also something else I've noticed about people who speak less. They tend to handle conflict with more grace. Because when you're not rushing to speak, you're less likely to say something in anger or defensiveness. You create a little space, a little pause. And in that pause, there's a choice. You can choose patience over pride, understanding over escalation. This doesn't mean they're pushovers. Far from it. It means they're choosing peace over chaos, control over reaction. And when they do speak up, when they say, "That's not okay," or "I don't agree," it carries weight. Because people know it's not coming from ego or emotion, but from something more grounded, something rooted in values. And when you reach a certain age, you begin to see how valuable that is. You've had enough disagreements, enough drama, to know that not every battle is worth fighting, that winning an argument often costs more than it's worth. So you pick your words carefully. You aim for peace, not victory. People who speak less also tend to be more in tune with their surroundings. It's as if they live life with their senses turned up. They notice details that others miss. The way someone's hands tremble when they're nervous, or how the room changes when a certain topic comes up. It's not a superpower. It's attention. It's presence. And it's something that many of us develop naturally as we get older. Because once you stop rushing to fill every silence, you start to notice all the richness that lives inside it. You start to observe instead of react. You start to feel more deeply, not just your own emotions, but those of others. You become more compassionate, more attuned, and the world becomes a little clearer. That's what happens when we slow down and stop trying to be heard all the time. We begin to see more, and that seeing, truly noticing the people and moments around us, is one of life's most precious gifts. Now here's something important to remember. Speaking less doesn't mean holding everything in. It's not about silence that comes from fear or shame. It's about intentional silence. Silence that comes from knowing the right time to speak and the strength to wait for that time. There's a big difference between silence that suppresses you and silence that strengthens you. People who speak less know how to express themselves without over-explaining. They're clear. They're thoughtful. And because they don't talk constantly, they often communicate more effectively. Their words have structure, meaning, intention. You don't walk away wondering what they meant. You know. And that clarity builds trust. In relationships, this trait can be a breath of fresh air. Think about it. How many misunderstandings in life come from people saying too much, or saying it the wrong way, period, or saying it before they've even understood what they're feeling? But when someone pauses, reflects, and then speaks, you listen differently, you receive it differently, because it was offered with care. And let's not forget, people who speak less also tend to be more creative. They spend more time thinking, imagining, reflecting. Their silence becomes a space for ideas to grow. They're not always announcing what they're working on or what they're thinking about, but behind the scenes, something is taking shape. You might relate to this. Maybe you've spent more time lately in your own thoughts, and you're surprised by the ideas that come to you when the noise stops. A memory, a solution, a perspective you didn't see before. That's the gift of quiet time. It makes room for clarity. And in our later years, this creativity often deepens. Not because we suddenly have more talent, but because we finally have the time and the silence to let those inner thoughts rise to the surface. We finally hear ourselves think. That's the quiet miracle of speaking less You see, this way of being, it's not passive, it's powerful. It's not about being timid. It's about being intentional. It's not about shrinking. It's about standing taller in a different way. So if you've ever felt like you don't speak up enough or that others talk over you, don't underestimate yourself. Your quiet strength may be the most powerful voice in the room. Let's keep walking this path together and continue discovering the deeper strength that lives in those who speak with intention, listen with compassion, and observe with wisdom. You know, one of the most overlooked things about quiet people is how much they respect silence itself. Not just their own, but yours too. They don't rush to fill every pause in a conversation. They don't jump in when you're still forming your thoughts. They give you room, space, patience. And in a world that seems to expect quick answers and constant noise, that kind of patience can feel like a gentle breath of fresh air. That's the kind of person who makes you feel safe just by being around them. Not because they're solving your problems, but because they're not adding more noise to your life. There's no pressure to entertain, no need to perform, just presence, just being there. And what's even more powerful, these quiet folks often become anchors for the people around them. They're the ones others turn to when things get messy, when there's conflict, when someone's hurting, when decisions need to be made. They're the calm in the storm. Not because they always have the answers, but because they bring a stillness that helps others find their own answers. There's something deeply grounding about being in the company of someone who doesn't rush, who doesn't react, who simply holds space. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But it's powerful. It's the kind of presence that stays with you long after the conversation ends. And the reason they can hold that kind of space? It's because they've learned to sit with their own thoughts first. People who speak less often have a habit of self-reflection. They spend time with themselves, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. They check in. They ask hard questions. They don't always have it all figured out, but they're willing to look inward even when it's uncomfortable. That self-awareness leads to another trait: emotional steadiness. These aren't the folks who fly off the handle at the smallest thing. They've learned to ride out the waves inside before trying to steer the boat outside. And when emotions run high, whether it's sadness, anger, frustration, they're often the ones who pause, take a breath, and respond from a place of clarity rather than chaos. That kind of steadiness becomes a gift not only to themselves, but to everyone they interact with. Think about how many arguments, misunderstandings, or regrets could be avoided if more people simply paused before speaking. If more people sat with their emotions before turning them into weapons. People who speak less have often already lived through enough to know that words can be sharp, even when unintended. So they don't throw them around carelessly. And that restraint, that patience, it builds trust. Now here's something a little more unexpected, but just as true. Quiet people are often very funny. You might not expect it, but when they do decide to speak up, their timing is perfect. Their observations are sharp. And because they haven't been talking the whole time, their humor hits even harder. It's subtle. It's clever. It's not loud or attention-seeking. It's the kind of humor that catches you off guard and lingers. It's because they've been paying attention. They've been watching, connecting the dots, noticing the ironies of life. And when they finally do share something lighthearted, it's like a little gem dropped in your lap. Something you didn't see coming, but you're glad it did. That's another strength of those who speak less. They value timing, whether it's humor, advice, or encouragement. They often say just the right thing at just the right time. Not too soon, not too late, just when you needed it. And that's not a coincidence. That's wisdom. That's empathy. That's experience. Now let's talk about something that's rarely mentioned but deeply important. Quiet people often develop inner resilience. They don't always process challenges by talking them out. Instead, they work through things inside, slowly, steadily, silently. And that internal process often creates a deeper kind of strength. They may not broadcast their battles, but they've fought them. They may not post about every hardship, but they've felt them. And because they've walked through their storms without making a lot of noise, they've grown roots. Deep ones. That doesn't mean they never need support. Of course they do. We all do. But they've learned how to stand on their own when they have to. And that quiet resilience can be contagious. It inspires others to pause, to breathe, to believe that calm doesn't mean weak, and that stillness isn't emptiness. In fact, stillness is where so much of life takes shape, where healing happens, where ideas grow, where clarity begins. And maybe, just maybe, you've noticed that in yourself lately, that you're drawn more to peace than to noise, that you choose your words more carefully now, that you don't feel the same need to fill every silence or fix every situation with advice, that you're finding a new kind of strength, not in saying more, but in being more present. That's not something everyone understands. But if you do, then you're already on the path. You're already practicing a kind of wisdom that takes most people a lifetime to recognize. And here's the best part. When you embrace this way of being, when you begin to honor silence as much as sound, you don't just change yourself. You influence everyone around you. You become a model of thoughtful communication, of emotional steadiness, of inner calm. Your words carry more meaning. Your presence brings more peace. Your actions, though quiet, speak louder than most people's shouting. So, whether you've always been the quiet one in the room, or you're just learning the value of silence now, I want you to know this. Your stillness is powerful. Your thoughtfulness is a gift. And your voice, when you choose to use it, matters more because of the silence that surrounds it. That's the beauty of speaking less. It's not about being less. It's about being more aware, more intentional, more grounded. And in this world that never stops talking, sometimes the wisest thing we can do is simply pause, breathe, and speak only when it truly matters. It's a funny thing, isn't it? How much we used to think that speaking up was the only way to be heard. No. We were taught that louder meant stronger, that more words meant more impact. But as we grow older, something shifts. We start to realize that it's not always about speaking more. Sometimes it's about speaking better. People who speak less tend to be intentional with their words. They don't just talk to fill time. They don't say things they don't mean. And when they do speak, it's often after they've taken a moment to reflect. That pause, just a second or two, makes all the difference. It's a space where emotion settles and wisdom rises. And you know what? That pause doesn't just serve them. It serves everyone in the room. It changes the tone of a conversation. It invites calm. It creates room for thought. We don't need more noise. What we need is more intention, more sincerity, more people willing to pause, breathe, and speak from a place of truth. That's one of the things I admire most about folks who speak less. They don't just protect their peace. They protect your peace too. They respect your time, your energy, your heart. They're not wasting words. They're not trying to win points. They're showing up as they are, calm, clear, and kind. And here's something I truly believe. The ability to speak less, but say more, is something anyone can cultivate. It's not about being born quiet or shy. It's about choosing presence over performance. And that choice? It's available to you every single day. You can practice it at the dinner table, listening more than speaking, asking more than telling. You can bring it into your relationships, offering your presence instead of your opinion. You can live it in moments of tension, taking a breath before you respond, allowing grace to lead the way. Because ultimately, this isn't just about communication. It's about character. The kind of person you want to be. The kind of legacy you want to leave behind. You see, when you speak less, you start to focus more on how you show up in the world. Are you showing up with empathy? With clarity? With kindness? People might not remember every word you say, but they'll remember how they felt when they were with you. And quiet people? They often leave the most lasting impressions. That's because their strength is rooted in something deep, something that doesn't need applause to feel real. It's the strength of knowing yourself, trusting yourself, valuing stillness, and understanding that you don't need to shout to be strong. And in this season of life, this beautiful, reflective, rich season, you have more access to that strength than ever before. You have the wisdom of experience, the power of perspective, the freedom to stop trying to be everything to everyone and start simply being yourself. And that self, that quiet, steady, thoughtful self, that's more than enough. So, if you've ever felt overlooked because you don't speak as much as others, let me say this loud and clear. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And your silence, it's not empty. It's full of meaning, full of wisdom, full of power. Let yourself be who you are. Let your calm become your strength. And let your words, when they come, be like little stones dropped in water, rippling far beyond what you can see. Because even when you speak softly, you can still move mountains. I'd love to hear from you. Has being quiet helped you in life? Have you discovered the strength in silence? Drop a comment and share your story. It might inspire someone else who's still learning to trust the quiet inside of them. And if this message resonated with you, if you found comfort or strength in it, I invite you to like the video and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. This is a place where we celebrate your wisdom, your journey, and the quiet power that comes with age. There's so much more ahead, and we'd love to walk this path with you. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you carry this message with you, not just in your mind, but in your heart. Here's to speaking less, living more, and embracing every moment with grace. Here's to living your best life at any age.